Book of Heaven, Volume 4, by the Servant of God Luisa Piccarreta, Little Daughter of the Divine Will. Year 1900, page 1–6. September 5, 1900. Hope, the nourishment of love. Since in the past days my adorable Jesus had not made himself seen so much, I was feeling diffident about the hope of reacquiring him again. Even more, I believed that everything was over for me. Visits of our Lord and state of victim. However, this morning blessed Jesus came, wearing a horrible crown of thorns, and placed himself near me, moaning, in the act of wanting a refreshment. So I removed it very gently, and to give him more pleasure I put it on my head. Then he said to me, "My daughter, true love is when it is sustained by hope, and persevering hope, because if today I hope and tomorrow I do not, love becomes infirm." In fact, since love is nourished by hope, the more nourishment it administers to it, the stronger, more robust and more lively love becomes. And if this is missing, poor love becomes infirm first, and remaining alone, without support, it ends up dying completely. Therefore, as great as your difficulties may be, you must never, even for one instant, move away from hope with the fear of losing me. On the contrary, you must act in such a way that, overcoming everything, hope may make you found always united with me, and then love will have perennial life. After this, he continued coming without telling me anything else. September 6, 1900. The state of victim. My most sweet Jesus continues to come. This morning, as soon as he came, he wanted to pour a little bit of his bitternesses into me, and then he told me, "My daughter, I want to sleep a little, and you, do my office of suffering, praying and placating justice." So he fell asleep, and I began to pray near Jesus. Later, as he woke up, we went round a little in the midst of people, and he showed me several conspiracies that they are making in order to provoke a revolution. Especially, I noticed a sudden assault they were plotting so as to better achieve their intent, and so that no one might be able to defend and guard himself against the enemy. How many gloomy scenes! However, it seems that the Lord is not yet giving them the freedom to do this, and not knowing the reason, they are consumed with rage, because in spite of their perverse will, they see themselves powerless to do it. It takes nothing else but the Lord to concede this freedom to them, for everything is ready. After this, we came back, and Jesus showed himself all wounded, and said to me, "See how many wounds they have opened in me, and the necessity of the continuous state of victim, of your sufferings, because there is not a moment in which they spare me offenses. And since the offenses are continuous, continuous must be the sufferings and the prayers so that I may be spared, and if you see that your suffering is suspended, tremble and fear, because not seeing myself relieved in my pains, may it not be that I concede to the enemies that freedom so yearned for by them." On hearing this, I began to pray that he would let me suffer, and in the meantime I saw the confessor who, with his intentions, pressed Jesus to make me suffer. Then blessed Jesus shared with me such and so many pains, that I myself do not know how I remained alive. However, the Lord did not leave me alone in my pains. On the contrary, it seemed he did not have the heart to leave me, and so I spent several days together with Jesus, and he communicated many graces to me, and made me comprehend many things. However, partly because of the suffering state, partly because I am unable to express myself, I move on and keep silent. September 9, 1900. Jesus prepares the soul of Luisa for communion. The necessity of shedding of blood. He continues to come, however, I spent most of the night without Jesus. Then, on coming, he told me, "My daughter, what do you want, that you are so anxiously waiting for me? Do you perhaps need anything?" And since I knew I was to receive communion, I said, "Lord, I waited for you the whole night. More so, because having to receive communion, I fear that my heart may not be well disposed to be able to receive you. Therefore I need that my soul be reviewed by you, so that it may be disposed to unite me with you sacramentally." And Jesus, benignly, reviewed my soul to prepare me to receive him. Then he transported me outside of myself, and together with him I found our Queen Mama, who was saying to Jesus, "My son, this soul will always be ready to do and to suffer whatever we want, and this is like a bond that binds our justice. Therefore, spare so many slaughters and so much blood which is to be shed by the people." And Jesus said, "My mother, the shedding of blood is necessary because I want this line of kings deposed from its throne, and this cannot be without blood. And this is also to purge my church, which is very much infected. At the most, I can concede to spare them in part, out of regard for the sufferings." In the meantime I saw the majority of the deputies plotting how to make the king fall, and they were thinking of putting on the throne one of those deputies who were assembled. After this, I found myself inside myself. How many human miseries! Ah, Lord, have compassion on the blindness in which poor humanity is immersed. Then, continuing to see the Lord and the Queen Mother, I saw the confessor with them, and the Most Holy Virgin said, "See, my son, we have a third party, the confessor, who wants to unite with us and offer his work by committing himself to concur in order to make her suffer, to satisfy divine justice. This, too, is like rendering the rope stronger, which binds you in order to placate you. Besides, when have you ever resisted the strength of the unions of one who suffers and prays, and one who concurs with you for the sole purpose of glorifying you and for the good of the peoples?" Jesus was listening to his mother. He had regard for the confessor, but he did not pronounce a sentence completely favorable. Rather, he limited himself to spare in part. September 10, 1900. Threats against the perverted world. This morning I found myself outside of myself, and I saw the many evils and most enormous sins which are being committed, also against the Church and the Holy Father. Then, as I returned inside myself, my adorable Jesus came and told me, "What do you say about the world?" Not knowing what this question was driving at, impressed as I was by the things I had seen, I said, "Blessed Lord, who can tell you the perversity, the hardness, the ugliness of the world? I have no words to tell you how bad it is." And he, taking the occasion from my very words, added, "Have you seen how perverted it is? You yourself said it. There is no way to make it surrender. After I have almost taken bread away from it, it remains in the same stubbornness, and even worse. And for now it goes on procuring it by thefts and robberies, doing harm to one's neighbor. Therefore it is necessary that I touch its flesh, otherwise it will become even more perverted." Who can say how speechless I remained at this speaking of Jesus? It seems to me that I myself have been the occasion of making him become indignant against the world. Instead of excusing it, I painted it black. I did as much as I could to excuse it afterwards, but he did not pay attention to me. The evil was already done. Ah, Lord, forgive me for this lack of charity, and use mercy. September 12, 1900. The sin of Luisa. Plots of revolution against the Church. It continues almost in the same way. This morning, on coming, he poured his bitternesses, and I was left in so much suffering that I began to pray the Lord to give me strength and to relieve me a little bit, for I could not endure. In the meantime, a light came into my mind that I was committing sin in doing this. Besides, what would blessed Jesus say? While on other occasions I prayed him to pour, this time when he had poured without waiting to be asked, I was looking for relief. It seems to me I am becoming worse, bad, and my badness reaches such a point that even before him I do not abstain from committing defects and sins. And no, Lord, I do not want relief. But drawing near my mouth, almost by force he poured a few drops of a sweet milk from his mouth, which mitigated my suffering. Who can say the confusion, the blushing I felt before him? I expected a reproach, but Jesus showed himself more affable, more sweet, as if he had not perceived my fault. On seeing this, I said, "My adorable Jesus, once you have poured your bitternesses into me and I suffer, don't you have to spare the world, don't you?" And he, "My daughter, do you think I have poured everything into you? Besides, how could you face all the chastisement I will pour over the world? You yourself have seen that you could not endure the little I poured, and had I not come to help you, you would have ended. Now, what would happen if I poured everything into you? My dear, I gave you my word, I will content you in part. After this, he transported me outside of myself, into the midst of the people, and I continued to see the so many evils, especially the plots of revolution against the Church and within society, to kill the Holy Father and priests. I felt my soul being tortured at the sight of these things, and I thought to myself, if, may it never be, they came to carry out these machinations, what will happen? How many evils will come? All afflicted, I looked at Jesus, and he told me, "And what about that revolt that happened here? What do you say about it?" And I, "Which revolt? Nothing has happened in my town." And he, "Don't you remember the revolt of Andria?" "Yes, Lord." "Well then, it seems nothing, but it is not so." That was the whole occasion and an incitement for other towns to revolt and shed blood, giving affront to sacred people and to my temples, and since everyone wants to show how much better he is in provoking evil, they will compete to see who can do more. And I, "Ah, Lord, give peace to the Church and do not allow so many troubles." And as I wanted to say more, he disappeared from me, leaving me all afflicted and concerned.